So hi ladies and gentlemen, Dave Dobbs here. What's the date today? It's the 15th of March 2019. Just a few updates. It's going to be a bit of an interesting video because I've made another bit of a breakthrough with I don't know if I've made a breakthrough. Maybe I've made a breakthrough with the movements of Planet X and this furthest orbiting twin-tail object. You know, some call Nibiru, whatever you want to call it, really. In my last video, I'd kind of come to this kind of like notion that it was a 300. Sorry, I always get my days and years mixed up, and it's such a massively complicated thing to get your head around. I basically made a mistake. I haven't made. I don't really want to call them mistakes, even though they probably are mistakes. They are. It's just an assessment of data as it comes through. I update this model as I go along, and I'd said before that I'd started off with seeing, Comet Hale-Bopp and all these other flybys, all these other comets, and come to this kind of like this notion that they were 200 days apart. And through this 200 days, and always being 4 days out, I'd work over through the course of around about a year. I'd worked out that it was kind of a 198-day cycle, but then we'd worked out it was 298 day cycles that made a 396-day cycle. And from this 396-day big cycle, I was able to start building a 2,000-year cycle. And I discovered this because of this bank statement that had left me kind of thinking about, well, maybe it was this bank statement that just left this odd number that was very close to the 1577 mark, which was one of the points where the Planet X system would have crossed the ecliptic, our solar system's ecliptic plane. And it had led me down to the only point where I could deduct 12 days from the pattern, and we'll delve into this a bit more. And I'd gone back to I discovered that in 262 there was a 3 days of darkness and earthquakes in Europe, Asia, and Africa at the same time. And it fitted directly into the model, except that to go back, we have to understand that in one cycle of Planet X going right round our sun, 338 years, if the big grand crossing, the next big and final grand crossing, and the 3 days of darkness that we realistically expect because of all the sightings that we've had, it's just getting closer and closer and bigger, and the earthquakes and the volcanoes are just getting just increasing and increasing. And you can imagine from my perspective why this is so important to me, is that if the carbon dioxide increase that we're seeing is as a result of increased volcanoes and earthquakes, then the last thing we should be doing is building nuclear power stations everywhere, and we should be really seriously thinking about shutting down those power stations and reassessing our understanding of what's causing climate change. And all of this feeds into this, all of this data that I'm offering kind of feeds into this argument that it's not that we are not seriously damaging the earth, but you can imagine, as a result of all the story of climate change, we've pumped out 1 billion new cars, all built on the kind of premise that we're lowering our carbon count by building these new cars. Each car, consumes 100 times more fuel than the car will ever use in its lifetime to save an extra few miles on the car. The whole thing is just massive greenwashing. So it seems like I might be a climate change denier or whatever, but clearly the climate is massively changing. But why? And then we have, we've all watched kind of global warming, Al Gore's global warming. Well, not just Al Gore's, but the whole global warming argument fall apart. And then we've seen climate change come in, and now we're seeing GSM, Grand Solar Minimum, coming in, and we're looking at all these different arguments. But are we really looking at what's fundamentally going on? And anyway, the error that I'd made was going back 12. If I'm assuming that I would to go back to, we'd had 13 crossings, or coming into the 13th crossing of, we're in the 13th crossing of the Planet X system, crossing our ecliptic plane right now since the time of Christ. And I was assuming that if I went back to the 12th crossing, then I'd have to deduct 12 days. But of course, there are 2 crossings in, like I say, in every cycle, which means that imagine if this system, Zachar Sitchin kind of was the main person really who fed us this information that Planet X has a 3,600 year orbit. But people talking about Planet X being 4 times the size of Jupiter, and 4 times as big as Jupiter, massive, dense, very, very dense planet. It spews out iron, which means it's very, very dense. It's a very dense planet, and you think it's gone from. Carlos Ferrada predicted it would pass the ecliptic, as I said earlier, and I said in many videos, on the 20th of January 1939. Well, he said it would pass on around about the 24th. He was ironically 4 days out there as well. It passed on the 20th of January 1939. Thousands of people died, thousands and thousands of people died exactly where he said, in Chile, and with the massive earthquake that occurred, which it was exactly what he said. Planet X was massive around about that time. Now, what I'm assuming is that Pluto was discovered in around about 1930. I'm assuming around about that sort of time. Now, imagine if Pluto was a red herring. Imagine if Pluto coming in, the observation of Pluto was actually Planet X. And this is potentially the real reason why they deducted it as a planet in the solar system, because actually the truth is there never really was a Pluto. The thing about NASA is that it seems, the stories of fake landings on the moon and everything else like that, we don't know if they really did go to the moon, whether they faked it. It seems that NASA has lied a lot or deceived us quite a bit down the way. And my father, used to tell me, he used to say, you can trust a thief, but you can never trust a liar. And imagine for a moment that Pluto was a total red herring to blind you from what was really there, that this was really Planet X. Now, think about that. Think about going over the top of the sun. This aspect, like all the tribulation period, where it cuts through in 1939. It cuts through the ecliptic, entering into the northern hemisphere of our solar system, and it goes over the top of our sun, and it takes 81 years to get to the 21st of January 2020. And now you think about 81 years to travel that distance. You think of how many times we're going to go around. We're going to go around the sun 81 times in that period. It means that the system is traveling unbelievably slowly. It means the system, is traveling over the top of our sun at about 130 kilometers an hour, about 70 miles an hour, roundabout. Unbelievably slowly. We also have to understand that our sun is moving about somewhere between 40 to 50,000 miles an hour. Earth is travelling around the sun at somewhere in between, somewhere like something like 67,000 miles an hour. So when you're talking about a planet, a massive planet moving 70 miles an hour over the top of our sun, we also have to understand that that's relative to the sun. The sun is obviously moving, like I say, 40, 50,000 miles an hour. So this thing is also moving 40, 50,000 miles an hour. Plus this speed that we're looking at relative to our sun, it's travelling over the top of our sun at relative to our sun, literally 70 miles an hour. Like slow, like really, really, really slow relative to our sun. So don't get too confused by the kind of these notions of relativity here. I'm just talking about the story of its speed relative to our sun, and so it's moving very, very, very slowly. Now that is its most rapid point. As it's accelerated in, as it's drawn in closer and closer to our sun in its rotation around our sun, in its elliptic orbit, as it's approached our sun, it's obviously increased. It's got faster and faster, and this point we're seeing now is its maximum velocity as a result of falling into our sun's orbit and then being slungshot back out again, which is what it's coming into now. So if it's taken 80 years to do its point of fastest acceleration, we can understand that it's going to start heading out, and it's only going to be able to go out. It's not going to be able to go out that far. I don't imagine it would even be able to go out that as far as some of our other big planets, Jupiter, Saturn, things like that. It's would it go out as far as those? I truly do not know. But what I wanted to do was I've been now and then I play with Universe Sandbox, which is a 3D universe simulation, a bit like SolarSystemScope.com, but it's a little bit more complicated. I've noticed it has flaws on it, and I'll take you through those flaws, but I just thought we would just drop a planet in. So let me just go into that now, and let's open that. We'll pause it. Actually, I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll relaunch it. Set up, reload. So we're starting on the 19th of January 2017 in this simulation, and we're going to go over to add, and we're going to add a binary planet, and we're going to add stars. We'll add a planet. We'll go for Jupiter. Let's just twist. I'm just going to twist that, drop that down a bit there. And let's go back to add Jupiter. And we're going to add Jupiter somewhere right between Mercury and the Sun. Okay, let's come out of that. Jupiter. Whoop. So let's just go on the editing of Jupiter now. We're going to recall it Planet X. Planet X, which really should be Planet 9, but I always call it Planet X because X is kind of the X in. I more see the X as more of a kind of algebra sign of the X in the, trying to work out what the X is in the equation. And we've got mass 318 times Earth. So let's change that to Jupiter, and let's just go to 4 times Jupiter. Okay, and let's just go to the motion now. We're now going to change the orbital period to, like, you can imagine if I said 338 days, 338 years, one orbit around our sun is how long it takes, given by all the kind of sightings that we've had over that we know about, especially around about the sort of like the 1600s, the comets around about the 1600s, and other comets and that sort of stuff. But we had a lot of data about sort of like about 300-400 years ago about comets and asteroids and such the like. A lot more data than we had previously, possibly. That I found a lot more accurate data that we can rely on, like the sort of like the, you know, the first discovery of the first dwarf planet in about, I can't remember when it was exactly, but I think probably about 1596. We know that the Catholics changed the calendar in 1582. We know there was a massive storm that scuttled the Tempest in 1588. We know that in 1606, Julian calendar, recorded in the Julian calendar, but now in the Gregorian calendar it would be 1607. But on the 20th of January 1606, we had the big flood around about Bristol and sort of like in the West Country around on the Somerset levels, and that was in 1606, on the 20th of January again. So this 20th of January seems to be a critical sort of point. So I just wanted to run a simulation. So we've done 4 times bigger than Jupiter. And let's just go down to perihelion 20. We notice that if I just come out here one shape, and if I click on Mercury, it's got pericenter, as in perihelium to the sun of Mercury, and they've got 4,597,917. As far as I know, it's about 47 million, and they've got 4,500,000. So they're quite a bit out here. They're about 45. They're about 43 million kilometers out here, which makes this model a bit difficult to work with here. But nonetheless, we are going to just try an experiment with what would happen if we drop a planet in orbiting using this model, so to speak, even though this model is clearly out. We're going to orbital period. Let's go back to planet X. We're going to change the orbital period to we're going to go to years, and we're going to go to half of 338, because imagine if it's half of this, and imagine because of this I deducted 12 years to get to 262, but actually if I was to deduct 12 years to get to 262, it would actually mean, because there's 2 crossings of the ecliptic in one cycle, it means that we would actually have double the amount of rotation. So it wouldn't be 338, it would be 169. So we're going to put half of that, basically 169. And then, is it still there? What happens now? Look, see, now it's just completely disappeared. So now we have to, so it's shot out because it cannot, because of its gravitational mass, it cannot accommodate that. So what we're going to quickly do is we're going to go down to the, and remember, we're just playing with figures here, because I'm just trying to get you to think about the sheer mass and size of this thing and its movement, and whether you could even have orbits as big as this. I'm of a mind that the orbital period that we were given for something like Pluto just doesn't make sense. None of these things really make sense in terms of, even though this model is either I'm using it incorrectly or I'm loading a realistic model supposedly here, and the figures are all way out. But let's just change the perihelion of that, and we're gonna bring that right down to less than 1. We should start seeing it. We should start seeing that coming in soon. There she comes. She's going to come down to about halfway there. And let's now see what happens if we go to the perihelion. Why have I not got the... So let's go to this one and see now what happens if I bring this down. No, see, if I try and bring that one down, it changes that because the mass is so massive. So that could be because it's recording the kind of like the mass as absolutely massive, but it's placed it in a universe which is actually condensed compared to the real size. So we have errors in this system, clearly. But nonetheless, I just want to give you an idea. We're going to run that now anyway. And we haven't got it set on the right ecliptic angle either. Can you see that we've got a massive wobble on the sun now? Oh no, that's because we're looking at Mercury. So let's just come back to the... Well, let's... I hope that wasn't Mercury. I've just adjusted there. No, it can't be. So let's... Where's Planet X gone? Let's check I've got that correct. $169 years. Yeah. So we're just going to zoom in and see where it's moving. And this could take a while, so let's just try to see how much we can speed that up. Okay, so we're speeding that up. Now what's going to happen is it's going to start increasing in acceleration as it starts getting closer and closer and closer to our solar system. So it's coming in here. I mean, it's a very awkward thing to work with, this is. I'm just checking I'm still recording. But whilst that's tracking in, we've got that playing. There's a chance that my screen recording is gonna pack up before it's before we actually get a chance to get this to move close enough to our solar system. But I can imagine, I mean, it's going to have to cross Pluto and Neptune's orbit, but I can imagine it's going to, as it starts moving in, it's going to start increasing and increasing and increasing in acceleration to a point where no way would it cross over the top of the sun in the 80 years that we've got listed down. This is just trying to give you a very, very loose idea that if something's that far away and it's coming in towards the sun, it's going to start accelerating and accelerating and accelerating. And now we know this because of the movements of comets and various other things like this, that when you have these big elliptic orbits and they have this, they're on a collapsing orbit, they are going to start increasing in acceleration. And no way is this going to go over the top of the sun in 80 years. No way could it be this far out. Where I'm going with this is, though that this might not actually, it is increasing a little bit. tell you what we might do. We might be able to sort of turn that around and at least look at it from maybe that perspective, and then we'll zoom it in there and we'll hold it there. Maybe that's too close, and we'll just tilt that up a little bit, and we've got Pluto coming in there, so we're just watching that now. What I'm suggesting here is that imagine if Planet X has never been that far away. Imagine it's always been there on 169 year, literally 169 year orbit exactly. It's been going round and round. It's always been the regulating force of this solar system, especially for Mars and Earth. It's mostly affected Mars and Earth, and potentially Venus. But it seems mostly, by my reckoning, that this specific furthest orbiting planet of the system, the twin tail object, Nibiru, some call Nibiru, mostly affects Mars and Earth, and it is the regulating force of these, of both Mars and Earth, and it's got much, the system the main system it orbits, the Planet X system, has this 169-year orbit. I mean, it's making a lot more sense to me, because when I play with these kind of, no matter what system I play with, I cannot make the story of a 3,600-year orbit. No way, at that distance coming in, would it be going over the sun and taking 80 years to cross over the top of the sun? And this is the most logical way of looking at this. Like I say, hopefully this thing's going to get closer and closer and closer, and we're going to start making more and more sense of this now. Like I say, we're tracking with Planet X at the moment. As you can see, we're just getting closer and closer, and we're just starting now to get closer, and it's starting to accelerate massively now. Whereas, let's just come out a little bit and see. Where are we coming in? I mean, we've got it coming in on the ecliptic plane here, and that's not correct at all. Obviously, it's going to cause havoc as it starts going into as it starts getting closer and closer to our solar system. But we've got to start thinking about the logic of what we've been told with these systems, because we've been given a lot of information. Now, like I say, imagine if Pluto really was a cover-up. Imagine if all these different asteroids that they give us, all these different names that fall in these 200 or 198 days apart, all leading us to this data that NASA is just constantly lying to us. We're being fed lie after lie after lie after lie, that we've got to this point where we don't trust any of the things that we're being told. So okay, so that's coming in, and it's crossed over the top of Pluto now, and it's going to start, in my opinion, it's going to start massively accelerating as it starts getting in now, as it starts getting closer. So just as we're watching that, I just want to give you the latest Brexit news, by the way, because this affects America and Britain, both sides of the Atlantic. Remember, we just had the vote yesterday, where they've said that they agree that there should be an extension to Article 50. Now, the European MEPs are mostly saying that if there's an extension, then there has to be a vote. There has to be a European election. Even though they voted to say no to a referendum, there should be a European election. Notice that, by the way, we're massively increasing on our speed. I notice we're getting a little bit faster. We've got a little bit of time yet. So there should be, by rights, by legal rights, because of our membership in the EU, there should be a European parliamentary election. But of course, it only takes one member state of the European Union to veto our rights to extend Article 50. Only one member can veto it, and then we have to leave with or without a deal at the end of the month, which is catastrophic, which is terrifying. So you can imagine, we absolutely know that Nigel Farage is going from member state to member state to member state right now, trying to find the weakest link in the chain to make sure that that he can find one member state. And do you remember what Nigel Farage said about all the other members of the European Union? He's insulted them so much. I so hope that they won't, but there could be. I mean, this could be Spain's opportunity to finally get their revenge on what happened in 1588. This could be Greece's opportunity to sort of like get their revenge on sort of like on the way in which the British have run the economy to drive them to you know, Britain has used the kind of leverage over Greece so they can be the main kind of point where NATO does all its bombing on, say, Libya. We did Britain did 11,000 bombing sorties using Greece as their basis to launch those attacks. And so much of this kind of all the money that's been, you know, their massive deficits. Look, we're massively increasing now our acceleration now. It's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. Can you see how we're massively increasing our acceleration towards the centre of the solar system now? It's going faster and faster and faster and faster, and it's just gonna, and it's just, so we'll zoom in now, and we're just gonna get a little bit of Planet X is getting faster and faster and faster. No way is this going to take... Look at the date stamp down the bottom there. No way is that going to take 80 years. Look at that, straight out. And it's the acceleration speed of it is ridiculous. So let's go now. Jupiter is coming. Jupiter is becoming... Jupiter's speed has suddenly increased massively as a result of coming close. Look at that. So let's now we're gonna pause that one shake before we, and we're gonna just increase our, oh, look at that. So we've completely and utterly messed up by the looks of it. Everything's gone a little bit loopy in there. Now the massive increase in speed of Planet X is gone absolutely silly, and it's massively increasing its speed now to the point where it's just gonna, there we go. So okay, so I'm going to pause it there and look, and now it's just getting thrown out. Everything's gone absolutely loopy in there. We've thrown all the models. Everything's getting, and now it's, and that's it. That would be an interesting model to run. Anyway, so we have this situation now. You know, in the original vision. That in the original vision, I saw Britain, you know, that made me write Laughing Gas. Remember, I put 4 years into writing Laughing Gas, which is a book about, it tells you really more than anything else. It tells you the woes about leaving Europe. Is why I wrote Laughing Gas. Really, I was shown a vision of Britain as the Titanic. You know, this was not an ayahuasca or anything else like this. It was just I'd opened up a practice in my writing, and that my father had taught me, who was an amazing channel, and he taught me 7 years before he died. He basically took me through his whole process. Remember, I'd already opened those doors, and I'd already got the confirmation that I needed to so that I could begin the process of opening those doors. I knew who it was I was communicating with. I knew my intentions, and I knew that it was going to take work and dedication to do it. So I did a practice for 4 years where I woke up at 5 o'clock every morning, where I could kind of wake up in my sort of dream time space and utilize the kind of like the existent, if you like, DMT in my system that my brain would release when I'd go into these kind of REM deep sleep different kind of cycles, and utilize that as my access point into my kind of fourth dimensional dream time, and then from there I could access my kind of fifth dimensional higher state, if you like. That's how I'm seeing it on. That's my kind of more, if you like, a scientific overview of what I'm seeing, because I see these realms now as much more scientific than I did airy fairy. So I didn't know what I believed they were before, but now I'm understanding that it's all science, and we're just beginning to understand how third dimensional existence can access fourth, fifth, and sixth, and higher dimensional existence, where we exist on higher planes. And anyway, I was walking down the beach, and in the sunlight, I started seeing this odd colours in my peripheral vision. And when I went into the right place, I suddenly realised it was bunting that I could see. And as I saw the bunting running up from what appeared to be the front of a ship up to a massive great funnel. And then I saw another funnel, and then I saw another funnel, and then I saw another funnel, and I saw 4 funnels. And I realised it was the Titanic, and then suddenly I looked at the plate, the massive great plate riveted to the front of the ship, and it didn't say the Titanic, it said Great Britain. And I went back, and I came out of the vision, and I went back to my computer, and I went to my odd bits folder, which I call it my odd bits, the unrestricted place where I write, and just anything can go in, where it's an open space. And I said, I want to know what that means. What does that mean? And literally the words that came crystal clear, I just wrote, Britain comes to a juncture. It stays in Europe and it weathers the storm, or it cuts its anchors and it heads west. But if it heads west, its fate is sealed. And you see, Farage is in bed with this free trade deal with America. Even Trump yesterday was saying, he doesn't rate, Theresa May's negotiating skills, but looks forward to a free trade deal with Britain. So we know that this is intention, and Nigel Farage is clearly working with Donald Trump, and every time this system has come into operation, come into existence, doors to a much, much higher God and existence open for humanity. And that which has subverted humanity all the way through, over the last 2,000 years and possibly longer, has desperately tried to lower our vibration at this critical time, and desperately tried to get us to surrender our sovereign rights. And by signing a free trade deal, we would open ourselves to giving up all of our sovereign rights, because you cannot stand in the way of these massive corporations because of these member state dispute systems. Like I mentioned, with Canada, it's become the most sued nation on the planet, and we would join that, and then Europe would lose once we sign a free date. Once we break from Europe, we have to take, we can no longer do business in the same fashion with Europe, and we're pumping in something equivalent to $700 trillion into Europe via the City of London every year. So what do? Do we take this money away? So you can imagine this situation is unfolding very rapidly. If Nigel Farage finds a member, if one of the European members to actually veto, like I say, this vote to extend Article 50, like I say, Britain's in a terrifying predicament at the moment. Britain's in an absolutely terrifying predicament. Like I say, I'm desperate to go and do this and put myself up as a candidate in the European election, and I'm putting it out there as much as I can via my channel, and I still haven't had a chance to write to all the the European Parliament and make my intention clear. But I will do that. I'll probably do that tomorrow, or to the electoral office, the electoral commission in the Houses of Parliament, and to the and also to the electoral offices of the Bristol City Council, and it's not just the Bristol City, because it's a much bigger area, and so I'm not too sure how that's going to unfold. But I'll begin the process tomorrow, and I'll notify it. And like I say, my intention is to come and run, because if Britain leaves, you will be then Britain. The rest of Europe is going to be thinking, "Oh my God, we've got to go with the money. We've got to go with the money, else we're all going to go bankrupt." Unless, of course, another party comes along and offers Europe another deal. Now, this is the terrifying thing. Now, this could be. We know that China is about to kind of go public with their kind of like with their I think it's RMB. The Chinese yen or whatever it is. Is it the Chinese yen? But the RMB, it's now gold backed, and now imagine if China comes in and does a deal with Europe to say, look, you don't have to join these free trade deals. Where suddenly you open yourself to late stage abortions, like they've allowed in New York. Not that, like I say, that will ever happen in New York, but you see, these are all it means. It seems like dark and baby sacrificing and killing a baby at first, when it's first born, but ultimately this is all about baby parts and access to organs to aborted babies when they're first born. Fracking, which pollutes the water. You're directing chemicals into the ground, and you're polluting the water table. That's against human rights. Water is a human right. So to risk polluting the water table, Europe says no to it. That's finished. Europe, if any member states of Europe, they're already fracking in England, but in Britain. But you can imagine if Europe signs free trade deals, they're going to get fracked, absolutely, without any shadow of a doubt. And then you've got genetically modified food, and that's just to begin with. This is just the beginning of this. We're talking about massive weapons development, all sorts of toxic weapons. Everything suddenly becomes allowed. The most horrible, horrible, evil stuff is suddenly allowed. Human rights means absolutely nothing when we enter in such a trade deal. And so many of you just don't see the link between the political link and the kind of like the cosmological astronomical links here. But these links, the same thing has gone on over and over and over and over again throughout history. We have an opportunity here to change the record and take this higher, not lower, not go into war and aggression. Because if Britain loses the European business, pound is going to collapse. Obviously, the euro is going to collapse unless another body, like I say, maybe Russia, maybe China comes in. Because if Europe goes down this corridor of joining free trade deals via Britain with America, it's fracked. It's utterly fracked. We've got to start seeing the bigger picture. All the stories that we've been fed by NASA, so much of it is just looking to be total bullshit. It's a very realistic thing that Pluto, the reason it was deducted as a planet, because it never existed. It really was Planet X coming in, and it's always been so close. It's really been so much closer, except it hides behind this, whatever this thing, this sphere that sits in front of it that we've been thinking is something that NASA set up. This thing has constantly been there. This is the regulating body and force of it's a binary twin that's always been really close. It's never been that far out. If it was that far out, once it came in, it would be accelerating so fast. It could never have this 80-year kind of like cycle over the top of our solar system. So it's always been much, 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 much closer, moving. That point over the top of our solar system is the very fastest aspect. So the rest is very, very slow, which means that this is a big, big, slow mover in comparison to the movements of our sun. And we're starting to have the opportunity of an overview here. So it hasn't been a massively long one. I've tried to race through it as to what is kind of an overview, correcting mistakes I made in the previous cycle. We're looking now because what led me to this as well. By the way, this update was because as soon as I made the video, or just around about the same time I made my last video, Steve Olson posted a video saying that he'd found a record of something occurring in 1860 of this big halo over the top of the sun, like we're seeing now over the planet that conceals the Planet X system. And it was like this thing keeps occurring, not just like every kind of like 388 years, but in 1860. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use I use the Sandbox system to create. I can't seem to go back in time with Sandbox, and if anyone can help me with that, anyone has got any ideas with Universe Sandbox to help me, or anyone's got an updated simulation with the correct distances of the planets from the sun, because they're very, very out, which might be why Jupiter got thrown so far off the thrown so far out so rapidly. But nonetheless, just by getting thrown out rapidly and us watching it coming in, we realised that it would accelerate and accelerate and accelerate much, much quicker as it collapsed in towards the sun. That this 80-year period over the top of our sun is, we've got to look at that, guys. We've got to be realistic about this. This guy put his entire reputation on the line to give us this information. He was considered an absolute madman. He because of his theories. The guy was a genius. The guy was an absolute genius. We, with all these modern systems, have an opportunity to start making real assessments about what we're looking at. The 3,600 year, you put 3,600 year orbit into these things. These things are just gone. They are just gone. They are on open orbits. You can't have 3,600 year orbits with big masses like that. Can you imagine? They'd just be gone. Gone. On any system you put in, it's just gone. Something like that going out, it's gone. Guys, we've got to start thinking realistically about what's happening and all the stories that we're being given, and we've got to start running simulations ourselves and start making sense of some of these figures and some of these. We're supposed to be intelligent people, and we're just putting bullshit maths into our calculators and holding on to crazy notions, which when we just play with them slightly, they don't make any sense. And all I'm trying to do is bring logic and sense into this arena and make you see it for what it is. And all the things that you're being told, trying to link all this stuff up to bring you back to kind of a sensible mindset. So thanks again. I'm off now I'm going to go right now. I'm getting picked up at 3:30 to go to the big climate change march in is it the one I'm going to is in Toulouse. I mean, my theory in it. I look at it. I clearly see that the Earth is being absolutely torn to bits by corporations and all the greenwashing that's going in. But I even though I realise that this climate change march is going on about, it's no doubt going on about. I'm not too sure what the actual parameters of the main arguments behind it, but I can pretty much guarantee that it's going to be about reducing our carbon footprint. And that, like the Hawaii volcano that happened previously in April, May, June last year. Kilauea, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, from those people who helped me with the pronunciation. Hopefully I pronounced it right, but that's not even listed as a volcano that went off last year. Do you know that? Because they said, it went off in the 80s, so it's just part of an ongoing volcano. So that doesn't exist. So that little graph, so the statisticians have made that look as if that didn't happen. Obviously, Krakatoa blew its top off, but that was just a mudslide, so that's not really counting. It's just like, guys, we're desperate. We've got all this kind of like, all these would-be kind of like scientists that are telling us that there's nothing happening on the volcanic frontier that's abnormal. It's just like, guys, That's just like, we've got, you know, the greatest part of the melt in around about Antarctica is round about where the sort of like the aspect that meets the Pacific Basin, where you've got all the volcanoes, so many new volcanoes going off. All the volcanoes that they call them seamounts that run from the Emperor Hawaiian, that run in the under the ocean, the Emperor Hawaiian seamount chain from the Kamchatka Peninsula, the arm that comes down from Russia all the way down. It's 4,600 kilometers long. It goes all the way down to Hawaii. Hawaii being the largest volcano on the planet, and the big volcano on I forget what it's called, on the Kamchatka Peninsula. You know, it's the largest in the northern hemisphere. That whole chain is all underwater volcanoes. They're all active, along with the whole ring of fire. It's all going off. There's nothing unusual happening. Guys, you're being lied to. You're being deceived, and they're lying to you on every front about what's happening. This is what's driving the carbon dioxide up. This is what's creating all the crazy weather, and they're using it to drive massive industry. To what are you going to do? Build another billion cars to save the earth? A billion cars built, all in the name of climate change, each one consuming 100 times more fuel than the car would ever use in its lifetime. And you're being told to build nuclear power stations everywhere while the earth is shaking. You've got to look at Fukushima, all the genetic mutations that are occurring as a result of that. The seas are dying, and yet we're in this crazy story that says build more power stations to save the earth, build a billion new cars. Oh, guys, I tell you, it's absolutely ridiculous, the story that we're in. I'm not, you might see me as a climate change denier, but I promise you I can massively see the climate is changing. And people can't breathe the air now. Everyone has to wear masks in China because they're making all these parts for all these billions of cars that they're pumping out to save the earth. And it's just like the whole story, every part of the story is that you're being fed is just to drive US dollars, because it's a fiat-based speculative currency. Same as the pound, same as the euro, which feeds off the kind of like the pound, which is what supports the pound and what supports the dollar. All these fiat currencies. What I'm asking you is, just because we're going to watch the euro collapse and we're going to watch the dollar collapse as China releases this new gold-backed currency and the world moves away from these fiat-based currencies, that's all it has to go. Do we have to break up the European alliance just because the US dollar and the pound might fail? Can we not do this in a more peaceful way, where if we see these currencies collapse, we're going to see our governments push for a war against Russia and China so they can have hegemony again? Do we want to go round this horrible cape of absolute utter destruction again and play this whole story like we did in World War One, like we did in World War Two? And you look at the English Civil War, and you look at the French Revolutions, these were all over currencies. These were all over kind of like the same old, this is the same old story going over and over and over. We could have a different story now. We could run a different story. We could do this peacefully, and we could have unity on this planet if we see the bigger story. So sorry, it is another long one, but thank you again for your time. I'm just going to carry on. I'm going to carry on with this intention of running in the next European election, and I'm going to tell you to put out that you want to be part of the European election. You want to be part of this unity, of this united Europe. It means that the united Europe has always protected each country's sovereignty. It has never been trying to get you to sign an agreement where you give up your sovereignty. This is a complete fallacy, a complete lie about what the European Union has represented. This is what they're trying to get you to go into, where you surrender your sovereignty, where you can be carved up. Take care. All the best. Thank you again for your time. Ciao. Bye-bye.